Without a doubt, the concept of creating a mech on your own is probably the most sought after feature in any game featuring giant robots. Anyone who's even a puddles deep into the genre has probably sat at some point considering what their own ideal construct would be, and it's literally the main reason why series like Armored Core still exist to this day. We as humans really like creating things that reflect our interests, and of course those of us with the nerdiest sub-blood tend to pair that instinct directly with our passions. Sadly, while there are plenty of mech games with customization out there, obviously, I find that customization can mean a few different things. Take Battletech and the Mech Warrior games for example. You can technically customize your battle mechs, but you're really not building your own. You're modifying something that already exists. Armored Core gives you much more freedom and lets you construct your own machine, but you're still confined to the in-universe pool of parts and weaponry. M.A.S.S Builder, though, rides a really fine line between the two. Arguably, it features more visual customization than either of them. The problem is, that's where a lot of its strengths begin and end. M.A.S.S is an odd creation. It was developed by Vermilion Digital and published by Kei Project, and I'm probably saying that wrong. The strange part is that the only other game Vermilion Digital seems to have developed is a cute little fantasy roguelike called Seed of Heroes, which couldn't be further removed from giant customizable robots if it tried. Kei Project, meanwhile, has published a staggering number of games featuring just about everything anime imaginable. Their own mission statement reads, Kei Project is the leading visual novel publisher in the US. We are dedicated to bringing the best from the East to the West. Which also likely means that Vermilion Digital created some games that we just didn't get over here. According to their website, they're essentially fans introducing Western audiences to games many of us would have never known existed, which is genuinely great, and it further illustrates the fact that I personally live under what is apparently the world's largest metaphorical rock when it comes to keeping up with gaming releases. But if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you probably already know that. So Kei Project is fine. I'm glad they're bringing over all that foreign goodness, and admittedly some foreign weirdness too. Vermilion Digital, on the other hand, seems to have all but given up on making any substantial improvements to M.A.S.S, something they basically admit over and over again during their own Steam AMA. Trust me though, you'll understand why that's such a problem later in the video. From what I can tell, much of the original team has since split off to work on their own projects, which unfortunately means M.A.S.S probably isn't going to get many, if any, meaningful updates in the future. That said, I have to give credit where it's due. Whoever answered that AMA might genuinely be the most honest developer on the planet. It's honestly just as refreshing to read as it is devastating for the fans of this game. They absolutely demolished the hopes of anyone asking about the game's future with the precision of a completely burnt out developer who's simply exhausted from answering the same questions over and over again. And yeah, I kind of found it hilarious. I do wonder what Kei Project thought about that AMA though. Lord knows the people in the comments certainly weren't thrilled. The game itself takes place in a devastated world that has adapted to the existence of creatures known as quarks. The game's all-purpose antagonists that can apparently be whatever the plot needs them to be at any given moment. Organizations have sprung up around combating them, and nearly every member happens to be either an attractive anime woman or a suspiciously youthful-looking guy. For a civilization that's supposed to be scraping by after the world went to hell, everyone is remarkably well-fed, well-dressed, and mentally stable, so go figure. There are a few characters, all sporting nicely illustrated portraits, but that's honestly where most of the characterization begins and ends. Their personalities rarely extend much beyond their designs, which is fairly common in games like this. Now look, I know that works for some people, but not me. Outside of that, when it comes to M.A.S.'s actual story, I honestly struggle to say there really is one. Sure, there's plenty of dialogue, characters talk, and there's setups, then they keep talking. The visual novel presentation gives the impression that something important is happening, but I never really felt like there was much momentum behind any of it. For the first 4 hours, I was basically just taking contracts to fight off the world's latest batch of invaders while various people explained to me that there were, in fact, more jobs to do. More enemies to fight, more places to go, characters would chat with each other, occasionally with me, and eventually something sort of resembling a plot started to materialize, but by the time it finally did, I couldn't have cared less. Which is disappointing, because I know visual novels can do so much more than this, even if I haven't played all that many myself. There are genuinely fantastic mech visual novels out there that people have recommended to me over the years. I haven't played many of them, but feel free to mention the non-perverted ones down in the comment section because as you probably figured out by now, I'm pretty new to that side of the genre. But if M.A.S.S is supposed to be a representative of that medium, then this is easily the weakest example I've personally come across so far. It's a story that mistakes having a lot of dialogue for actually having something to say, and after hours of conversations that rarely felt like they were building towards anything meaningful, I found myself paying more attention to the mech customization menu than anything else really. The actual game itself is ultimately just a toy box built around the same structure as a gunpla kit, letting you make whatever visual customization you want so long as it conforms to the parts available, which I guess is just a wordy way of saying you're still stuck with the pieces the game gives you. Quite literally, almost everything here feels like a direct lift from Bandai's godly offering to hobbyists, to the point that I'd argue that the entirety of M.A.S.S is basically a third-party version of Gundam Breaker. At least in the same sense that SNAA, In-Era Plus, or Motor Nuclear sit alongside Gunpla lineups. Are they homages or are they ripoffs? That's ultimately up to you to decide. Personally, I don't care either way because at the end of the day, it's genuinely fun to build. Well, for a while at least. Building your mech can actually be pretty involved. And I spent a stupid amount of time trying to put my own design together. It was honestly one of the most enjoyable parts of the game. I just wanted to make something that looked cool, something that felt like it was mine. More than anything, I was hoping to reignite that creative spark I've been missing lately, and for the first few hours I genuinely thought M.A.S.S was going to scratch that itch. The more I understood the editor though, the more I realized the game wasn't really like Armored Core, where every part is carefully designed around functionality. Instead, it felt more like a Lego game. You can theoretically strap all kinds of bits onto your mech and build whatever you want within the layer limits, but you're always building on top of existing parts that you have absolutely no choice but to use, sort of like the standard Lego Man template. So rather than starting with a basic internal frame and constructing your own machine from the ground up, which feels like the most obvious direction for a game whose biggest selling point is customization, you instead take what is essentially a Gunpla knockoff, paint it, stick some extra armor on it, and move a few things around and then call it your own. And, well, that kind of sucks. Not because the editor is bad, it actually isn't, it's because there is a ceiling to how original your creations can ever be. No matter how much effort you put into them, they're always going to look like they came from the same handful of kits. You're remixing existing designs more than you're creating your own, then you discover something even worse. Almost none of the visual customization actually matters. Outside of a handful of weapon components, none of those extra parts affect gameplay whatsoever. They don't change your mobility, they don't affect your stats in any meaningful way, they don't alter your fighting style, they're just there. After a while, everything you're doing starts to feel a bit pointless. Give me multiple limb configurations, give me wings that actually do something, give me reverse joints, quads, treads, oversized industrial walkers, spider legs, anything besides another variation of a basic Gunpla body. If you're advertising mech customization as the game's biggest feature, then let me actually build something that doesn't immediately scream, yeah, that's another Gundam. Unfortunately, the LEGO game comparison doesn't really stop at the customization. The combat honestly has about the same level of depth, and I should know because I played enough LEGO City Undercover with my son to recognize it when I see it. Weapon customization is pretty straightforward. For melee weapons, you're basically choosing a hilt and a blade. Sometimes you get 2 blades if you're lucky. Guns work pretty much the same way. Pick a grip, pick a barrel, and the barrel decides how the weapon fires. Everything else is just selecting which missiles or drone weapons you'd like to bring along. That's about it. Everything else is developing stat attachments to help get through the slog you'll be facing going forward. From here, you'll wander through some of the most basic hallway arenas imaginable, taking potshots at quarks before activating something, disabling something else, or clearing out another room full of enemies. It's repetitive, mind-numbingly repetitive, and to be fair, I still admit that can be fun. I'm actually someone who actually enjoyed SD Gundam Battle Alliance, and that game isn't exactly known for having revolutionary gameplay either. If M.A.S.S had simply committed to being a fun, straightforward action game built around an okay customization system, I probably would have been fine. Instead, it throws bosses at you, and then more bosses, and then even more bosses. And these are some of the most tedious bosses I've come against in a long time. Not because they're difficult, not because they require some incredible mastery of the mechanics, they're tedious because they're gigantic health bars disguised as boss fights, and that's really the game. A huge portion of your playtime is spent shaving away absurd amounts of health while repeating the exact same attacks over and over again. Even on higher difficulties, they don't become significantly more interesting, they just take longer. difficulty through endurance is still boring. By the 5th or 6th boss, I was already wondering how many more the game was going to throw at me, and had I not been making this review, I think I would have stopped playing the game altogether out of sheer boredom. And that's pretty much the biggest criticism I can throw at M.A.S.S. It genuinely feels like Vermilion Digital understood how to build a mech editor, but never really figured out what to do once the player actually left the garage. The gameplay loop becomes so repetitive that it almost feels like a prototype stretched into a full game, and it's one of the biggest examples of gameplay padding I've personally experienced. And to make things even worse, the game expects you to replay these exact same missions and bosses over and over again if you want to grind for more parts. The same arenas, the same enemies, the same bosses, the same oversized health bars, repeatedly. Just thinking about it is exhausting. But I guess at least we got a sweet virtual arm reference before each mission. What's left to talk about here? The music, I guess. There really isn't much to say about it, and I'm not going to get hammered by YouTube just because I want to post a track from M.A.S.S Builder of all games. It's the same handful of tracks on repeat, including one that restarts every single time a new conversation begins, which is absolutely infuriating after a while. Even if the track were particularly good, which I'd argue it isn't, hearing it constantly would wear anyone down. It's just another part of M.A.S.S that exists without ever really standing out. And that really is the general theme of the game. M.A.S.S isn't quite ass, and yes, I had to go there, but it's pretty disappointing. It never really grows beyond being a capable mech editor with a game awkwardly built around it. For a few hours, I genuinely enjoyed tinkering with my designs, but the longer I played, the more I realized I was having far more fun in the garage than I was ever going to have piloting the thing I'd spent all that time creating. As for Sekkei Project, I do expect you'll see more of their games on this channel. Just stumbling across their catalog introduced me to a bunch of titles I genuinely never heard of before, and I'm curious to see what else they published. Vermilion Digital though, more effort needed to go into everything beyond building the mech. It's great that you gave us the tools to make something cool, but at some point we actually have to use it, and that's where M.A.S.S falls apart. Anyhow, I've been Kei-Nova. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and you'd like to support the channel and to keep my drive for creating mech content growing, and I'll see you in the next one.